Why do I think it's important, and why I think it's important to bring it back? I thought it was important because simply we are living now in a crisis. And I'll give you the manifestations of this crisis, which I'm sure you see it every day. Nowadays, people are saying anything that is rational and universal is oppressive. Am I right? Correct? Okay. Even sometimes people say that about science nowadays. Okay? And on both sides, sometimes, of the political spectrum. Okay? Mr. Trump thinks that climate change is an oppression by science against the interests and freedom, the invisible hand of his capitalistic friends who wants to kill all the forests and, okay, kill all animals till the last breath, okay? So, and use them, okay? So, and there are other people also, there are other people who are contending that reason or any system of metaphysics, to the extent that metaphysics and reason have become some kind of a notorious term, okay, nowadays in academia. If you say that I'm interested in them, unless you are doing metaphysics in the very limited way that my friends in analytical philosophy, and I do some analytical philosophy, do it, which is to limit it to problems about qualia and the status of substances in physics and properties, questions that usually not more than 100 or 150 people around the world are concerned about, who are doing analytical philosophy. So, okay, so this is what this is what metaphysics has been reduced to. So that's a big issue because it hits you in every way. Okay, it hits you when we talk about pluralism. Should the pluralism of the society, the diversity in society, be based on the material difference and identity politics, or should it be based on a universal perspective that binds us all? That is a question that pops up in our face in every political and sociological debate, correct? Or am I exaggerating? Should our identities be the reference for laws and social norms and political norms, our individual identities? Some people say that this is the way in which you can secure freedom and proper exercise and practice of democracy. Others say no, it has to be a universal human frame that binds us all. Okay? So it is the relation between difference and sameness. Now, is this something new? Because I already talked more than I should. Is this something new? No, it isn't. That is a question in philosophical anthropology, or since we are talking about human sciences, or the theory of human nature, philosophy of human nature, from the time of Plato. Plato brilliantly discusses the question in the Republic. Okay? But what is happening nowadays is something very different. Okay? Is that for the first time, the question seems to be becoming more and more, particularly in academia, some kind of a taboo. And there is some kind of a systematic attack against reason that I feel, I and many of my colleagues, that is happening nowadays. And this is why I thought that this is something that is important. Okay? And last but not least is that, particularly when it comes to Islam and Islamic studies, most of the people who study Islam in academia, they study it from the perspective of an already given theory, without knowing anything about any of the problems that I'm talking about. And that is something that I find, as a philosopher, truly, it's fascinating on one level, but then on another level, it's highly depressing. So people go and they say, okay, I'm going to use Foucault to study, for instance, gender relations in Fatimid history. Okay, time out. Okay, do you really know Foucault? Do you really know the origins of Foucault's thought? Do you really know what the problems Foucault said? Do you really know his relationship to 100 years of Western philosophy that led to horrible crises, including World War I and World War II, when Europe suddenly after that decided that it's no longer interested in its metaphysics? Sometimes I find people talking about phenomenology, for instance. I worked in the religion department for a few years, okay, and they say stuff that neither Husserl nor Heidegger nor any of these major, gigantic figures of phenomenology would warrant even as an acceptable sentence. Phenomenology, as I have been seeing used in many published peer-reviewed articles, I'm serious, has become a word that refers to subjective experience. If you said that to Heidegger or Husserl, he would kick you outside of the room. Phenomenology referred to very strict structures either of consciousness and the production of meaning, for in the case of Husserl, or for the existential and existential with an E structure of being dash in the dash world. Sein in der Welt. And it's a very complex system that he develops, and it's based on a very deep understanding of finitude and the structure of temporality and so on and so forth. So to make a long story short, we are really living a crisis nowadays in humanities as far as, first of all, understanding the roots of the problem. People are attacking metaphysics and rationality without knowing the basis of that. And within all of that, you have a huge tradition called the Islamic sciences that is not interrogated as far as its position on this. Okay? So, hence the title of the lecture, or that third lecture. So I talked about Delta and Foucault, and then I talked about the problem of sovereignty. This time we're going to talk about morality and aesthetics, and the reason why morality and aesthetics is because morality always, as I said, refers to the universal, okay, at least as it was seen throughout the history of philosophy. And then aesthetics is a domain that mediates between both of these. Okay, why is it so? Why am I claiming that aesthetics is that? Because think about any work of art. What does work of art do? What does metaphor in poetry do? It's a question. Yes?
Transcend us in some way or another.
How?
To our ideal self, maybe.
But what does it do with the notion of the ideal? What does poetry do? What does metaphor do? It symbolizes, correct? Symbolizes what? Symbolizes usually something that is very lofty, very transcendent, very not physical, into something physical, correct? This is what poetry does. Okay? So it always connects the transcendent with the eminent or the physical. Okay? Many people talked about that from let's stay restricted to the modern period. Kant is a major philosopher who talked about aesthetics as that mediating domain, and so did someone like Delta as well, and many others. So, and in that sense, aesthetics is not simply an expression of, wow, this is a beautiful picture, because this is how usually we understand aesthetics. Aesthetics is a very complex and deep human domain, okay, that binds the universal with the particular. So, and hence, many philosophers, like Hannah Arendt, for instance, like Kant, like others, talked about the relationship between aesthetics and politics, and as a matter of fact, this is a growing field of inquiry now. So, since the problem, to recap things, is the relationship of, or the crisis of rationality that led to the crisis that gave birth to the human sciences, and that crisis is the relationship between the rational and the empirical, or the transcendent and the eminent. We thought, Professor Fadel and I, that we should talk about that, okay, how aesthetics and morality as a universal rational claim are related, or they speak with each other, and what Islam has to say on that particular problem.